I only have about 30 minutes, but I'm going to try and go slow. So let's talk about async. First and foremost, if you look in the All the Things document, you're going to find that we don't have any examples. We've got a little brief description and no links. So today's video is going to be that link, and we're going to really try to learn as much as I can teach you about async. There is a little bit that I still am learning, like specifically in the promise section, but we're going to cover some of that too. Going into Horizon to get started. As we're loading up, I think it's a good time to talk about async. So if you're not familiar, it allows you to use setTimeout. It allows you to use setInterval. Those are the two major things that you'll be using day to day. But there is some additional features of async, like the ability to create an async function which runs on a separate thread. And if that sounds scary, I mean, it might be. But there's some really cool features you can do. And I should really create a notepad, so let me pause and write some ideas down. More direction, ready to go. So let's get into Horizon, which should be opening up over here. Black screen. This must be new to the latest version, because I feel like I have to open it twice recently to get past this black screen. Peculiar. Dun 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 dun. Hey, we made it. I was like really getting nervous there. All right, let's head into our Think Like a Programmer world. I'm a little worried it might still be broken from yesterday. I'm really hopeful that that got fixed. Let's see. Hey, here we are. And so the way to know if it's broken is if we see that thing in the center of the world, which we do. Oh, that's unfortunate. I don't think there's any way to fix that easily. We will try one thing. So this tutorial is a future tutorial that you'll be getting into. It's the All the Things one. It's coming up in the playlist. Let's go ahead, unless you have been watching these as they've been releasing, in which case you saw it yesterday. Let's go ahead and that was the live stream. Delete selection. So I've cleared everything out. I'm kind of curious if we just try using a backup and we just roll back to the oldest backup and hit restore. Perhaps that will fix it. If not, we're just going to create a brand new world. And I mean, ideally, hopefully you haven't had this happen in one of your worlds. So I think this happened right after we clicked the close world button. So I think for whatever reason that is broken. Yikes. That has me very nervous because I think a lot of people have been using it. And I'm hoping this is just affecting this one world. But look at, okay, restoring worked. Using the backup button did work. So that is great. We're back here in an empty world. And what we want to do is create some code. I'm going to make this code run on an object of some sort. And I thought it would be nice if we could visualize it. So under gizmos, there are a few things we could use to visualize, like a particle effects would be kind of fun. But in my case, I think I want to use a text gizmo because it's pretty basic. So we can write like a number. And that's kind of what I'm thinking we're going to use is just a number right there. Totally good. That is reverse, so say 180 degrees on the rotation. And all right, so we've got our little number there. And now we can create a script, and we're going to try this. So if we click Attach Script, we can click New Script, and I kind of like this new way of making scripts because if there is a default script, it makes it for you. And we're going to go ahead and call this one Text Display Async Test underscore entity because it gets attached to an entity. Text Display Async Test. Very clear what that does. That's going to create and attach. It does take a second to compile the script before we can do 3 dots and edit. So give that a moment to finish. There we go. Now we can go 3 dots, edit script, which opens it up. Not too bad. All right, here we are. Now this has the default script, which unfortunately includes the star, which I don't like HC dots. So I go ahead and delete the HC dots as well as that first import line. Then we switched to explicitly importing by hitting Control period and then clicking Enter to import from Horizon Core. And now that we have our default script set up, we can start talking about some simple async delays. The easiest one to do is going to be a setInterval, and setInterval is going to allow us to create a loop. So I like to call these loop whenever I'm making one. And inside of our loop, we can track how many loops we've run by using a variable. And if I have a variable that's global to the whole document, I usually put it up here just above start. But in the case that it's specific to a method, I do occasionally put a variable right here, like a count. So count equals 0. And so I'll put that right there. And I do like to have like a little bit of double space. These are just personal stylistic choices. You absolutely could put this above start, and I'm kind of debating it still. But anyway, for the sake of today, we're going to put it right next to the loop. And in loop, all we're going to do is say count plus plus, which increments it higher. And we can change the text on self, because this is running on a text gizmo, to be the current count. So we'll say this dot entity dot as a text gizmo. So we're casting the type to be a specific type of entity. So now that we have the text gizmo entity type, we can then use the dot text to adjust the text property, and then dot set to set the value. And we're going to set that to be simply count dot toString, and you have to call toString using parentheses because it is a method, and then I like semicolons, so add one to the end, and that is our loop setup. Now to get this loop running, we use setInterval, which is the first thing we're going to learn in async. And I'm actually kind of debating maybe doing this using setTimeout. So yeah, let's try setTimeout. So we use async dot setTimeout. And the reason we're going to start with setTimeout is because it runs it just one time, and then we'll change it to setInterval so you can see it run multiple times. So inside of here, we draw an arrow function, curly braces, put a comma after the curly braces with the amount of delay we want to take, which is going to be 1 second. So we're just going to use 1 second delays. And then inside the curly braces is where we run the code. And in this case, we want to run the code inside of the loop method. So to call the loop method, we use this dot loop, and then parentheses calls it. And so we're saying async setTimeout, this dot loop is going to run after a 1 second delay. We'll go ahead and hit Control Save. You can close out of these old scripts. Don't save, close, don't save. Okay. And what we should be able to do now is hit play after this compiles. Looks like it's now done. I do want this to start at 0 so it actually looks correct from the user perspective. So now we hit world simulation on, and it goes 1. And now we've only used setTimeout, so it just runs the one time. So it's not going to keep going. Now let's change it from setTimeout to setInterval. Now that seems pretty straightforward. Control Save. And what we should now see is it's going to keep counting upwards indefinitely. And it's not going to stop. Oh no! That's unfortunate. Clear. And so we'll say world simulation on. 1, 2, 3. Very nice. And that will just go forever, which you may or may not want to do. And so let's go back to setTimeout. I'm just going to hit Control Z. And let's change this from 1 second to 2 seconds. And let's duplicate this line using Control C, Control V. And this first line is going to be a 1 second. Control Save. So now we have loop being called once and then a second time. And what I think we're going to do is change loop. And there's a cool way to change the name of the method and affect all 3 of these instances. You right-click and click Rename Symbol, and we can call this Update Counter. Okay, so this is a little bit more accurate since it's no longer a loop. It's now behaving as a counter. So we're saying Update Counter after 1 second, Update Counter after 2 seconds. I want you to take a second to guess what that's going to do, and then we're going to see if you're right. It should be pretty clear what this is going to do. There's nothing crazy happening yet. It's just a small baby step. So now when we hit world simulation on, we see it goes to 1 and then 2. That's probably what you expected because we just have 2 setTimeouts which each run update counter 1 time. We aren't running a setInterval. Now of course we could have this be setInterval and then it's running setTimeout once and then it starts the interval after 2 seconds. What would be interesting about this, and I just want to, if you want to take a second to pause the video and ask yourself, what will this do? Let's see what it does when it's compiled. I mean, I know what it's going to do. Do you? And so when we hit world simulation on, you'll see it goes 1 2, and then it takes 2 seconds before updating the counter, and another 2 seconds, and another 2 seconds. Now it's still incrementing by 1, but it's now a 2-second delay. And of course, there might be instances where that's what you want to do, but that's actually not what I was trying to queue us up for. But just showing you some basics here. So now that we have our set timeout back, I use Control-Z twice to get back to where we were. Set timeout at 1 second is actually going to be used to cancel our set timeout at 2 seconds. And so we're not going to run this .update counter anymore. We're going to backspace that. We're going to move the set timeout that says let's set a timeout for 2 seconds out to above. And if you hover over set timeout, you're going to see that it returns a number. And if you read this, it says returns the timer created by the call to set timeout. This value can be passed to clear timeout to cancel the timeout. It is guaranteed that a timeout ID value will never be reused by subsequent call. So lots of information when you hover over stuff. But what this means we can do is we can say constant timer ID equals, and so this timer ID number we can utilize inside of this async to cancel it. So we'll now say async dot clear timeout, parentheses, timer ID. And then I like semicolons, so add one there. And so this should be fairly clear what's happening. We'll read it just back one time. On start, we are getting a timer ID by calling async.setTimeout, which is going to run update counter after a 2-second delay. But then we started another set timeout that runs after a 1-second delay that clears the timeout on the timer ID. Now, this is just to demonstrate how to clear a timeout. This obviously makes no practical sense because nothing's going to happen, but let's just go make sure nothing happens. So here we are. Looks like the code is already compiled. We'll go ahead and turn world simulation on, and 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing has happened. That's a good sign. That's what we wanted to happen. Fantastic. If you really wanted to see that nothing was happening, we could actually add console logs inside of these curly braces. We're not going to do that, but so far so good. And the same thing is true for a set interval. So let's try and change this to be slightly different. Let's imagine instead of using set timeout, we use set interval. And that would mean that on this set timeout, we need to not clear a timeout, but clear an interval. So that's an important distinction. And let's say we want this set interval to run once per second, but we want to clear it after 6 seconds. Okay? Now, I personally do not like to use whole values on my clear interval. I want to make sure I know exactly how many times this is going to run. And I don't want there to be this kind of like maybe it cancels it, maybe it doesn't cancel it at the 6-second mark. So we're actually going to change this to 5, 5, so halfway between its next one. So this should run 5 intervals before getting cleared by our clear interval. Let's go see if that works. And world simulation on. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. All right, that's pretty good. So with that set up, I feel like we have a pretty solid foundation of set timeout and set interval. I'm going to tell you that is 99% of what I use with async. Like 99% of the time, that's what I'm doing. So if you haven't learned that well, please let me know in the comments how I could have explained it better. But I just think if you play with that some, you're going to get really good at it. And that is the bulk of what you need to know about async. But there is more we can talk about, and so we shall. So let me go ahead and mark set interval and set timeout done. This next part is where things get a little bit more complicated. And I just want to start with some basics so you build some intuition about running on a separate thread. What does that even mean? So a computer has multiple cores typically. And in the beginning, you guys might remember, maybe I'm getting old now, I'm going to date myself here. But when I was growing up, computers only had one core that was one thread, one main thread. And I remember when I bought my first computer, I think it was an 8-core. It was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And in fact, today that's still considered pretty good. But they now make like 64-core computers. So what those cores do is they can each run their own thread and their own processes. And so when you use async, you can actually put some code on a separate thread because your main thread is where everything's happening. If you pause your main thread, you stop code execution. What? What does that all mean? Let's, instead of thinking about these as threads, let's imagine that you have a scribe who is writing to a console. So you have multiple writers, right? And these are your threads. And so you're talking to one, that's your main thread. That's like where almost everything is happening, is on main thread. And what that allows you to do by having one main thread is make sure things happen sequentially in the correct order. So this one scribe or thread is going to take care of 99% of your code. But occasionally you might want to go and use a separate scribe or thread instead of like bogging down the first one. So if you have something really intense you need to run, you might put it on a separate thread. And we're going to show you how you can take advantage of that feature. And yeah, let's go ahead and give it a shot. So here we've got our text counter. Let's change it so it counts up to 60. So I'm going to change this to 61 seconds, or no, 60. Oopsie. I went full screen somehow. How do I unfull screen? I don't actually know. I clicked an F key. Nope, not that one, not that one, not that one, not that one. I don't know how to unfull screen. Windows key. I'll figure this out. I'm just going to close out. I'm just going to close out of VS Code and reopen it. That seems reasonable. 3 dots. Open external editor. Yay! Okay, thank you. So we've changed our timer to be 60.5 seconds to cancel. So this is going to update all the way up to 60. So we've got this update counter running for 60 counts. Now what we want to do is create a separate thread to update the color. Update color. Now, this is interesting because what I'm about to show you doesn't work on more or less anything but a text gizmo. And it's very confusing because if you type this.entity.color, this is on all entities, but it only affects text gizmo and maybe a couple other weird, strange gizmos, but you can't use this color for more or less anything else. And it's even more confusing because it says the color of the entity, except custom model meshes do not have color. And so when you hear entity, you're probably thinking of like tri-mesh custom model stuff, but really entity just means any sort of thing that exists in Horizon. It's complicated. Anyway, this color component we can use though, in this case, to update the color of our text. And so we're just going to start by making this method work. And so update color needs to know the current hue. So we're going to create another variable called current hue. And current hue is going to be equal to 0. Just like before, I'm going to add some double spacing so it's clear that this is a section and this is a section. So now in update color, this.entityColor.set allows us to say, let's update the color. And there's a feature called, I believe it's color.from. Oh, no, that's not it. I thought, I have an imported color. Make sure to click enter while you're typing color. And then dot from HSV. HSV stands for hue saturation value. And if we create a new vector 3, so we say new vec3, don't forget to click enter while typing, then H is in the X slot, which is our current hue value that we just created above. And our saturation will set to 1, and our value will also set to 1. Value basically behaves like brightness. Okay, so now that we have our hue saturation value being applied, we now need to update our current hue when the color comes through. And I like to do this in steps of about 1/20th of a hue. So we'd say current hue plus, or excuse me, the best way to write this is actually to use the equal symbol. You might have seen this in one of our videos already, but what you want to do is type current hue equals current hue plus, now we could do the math right here, 1 divided by 20, but I just don't want to be doing math right there. So instead I'm going to just type in the number because I know it. It's 0.05. If you multiply 5 times 20, it's 1. So, or 100. 5 times 20 is 100. There you go. So that's how you get 0.05. And then if we wrap this in parentheses, we're then going to be able to say modulus 1. What this means is when current hue is at 1 or a greater, it's going to loop back to 0. So if you set this to an odd number than 7, like 0.75, it might not land on 1. It might go over by 0.025, in which case when it goes over 1, it returns the remainder of 0.025. We're just going to switch that back to 0.05 because that's 20 steps, which is what I was going for. So we're going to have 20 different colors using this update color. Now, if we use setInterval again, we can hit Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to move this down below to separate these out. And we're going to call this the color timer ID. And then we can call update color. And we'll do the same 1 second. In fact, I think we're going to change this to be 10 times faster. Yeah. Let's go with 3 times. Yeah, 3 times faster. 300 millisecond delay. So approximately 3 times per second. We're not using the color timer ID, but we're going to keep it there in case we decide we want it. So technically, you could delete this, but we're going to leave it there just in case we need it in the future. Hitting Control Save now. So what we should see happen is we should see the color shifting kind of dramatically in steps, 3 steps per second. But it shouldn't flicker because it's a hue shift. So no flicker warning required. Clear and world simulation on. Nice. So you can see the color is shifting. It's kind of uncomfortable the way it's shifting between the number changes. So, but it's shifting, and that's what we were going for, right? If we go back in here, I think we should change this back to 1 second so that it changes with the, note the underscores are not required. It just makes it readable. Thanks to Waffle for teaching me that. I really appreciate it. It makes my code look a lot easier to read. So world simulation back on, and now we're going to see 1, 2, and you can watch the hue shift with each of these color changes, which is nice. That is actually really nice. Now, if you knew you were going to change the color with the, with the timer, you could then do both of these, update color and update counter. And I just want to demonstrate that for the sake of, making sure you have a full grasp of how this works. You could, inside of this timer, break it down like this onto multiple lines to make it easier to take this .update color, Control-C, and then Control-V, and then I can comment this out using Control/ and Control-Save. And now we're running both update counter and update color inside of this. I do not recommend putting too much code. I think 2 lines like this is acceptable, especially when you might be dynamically changing how the code is going to run at this point. But typically, I'd recommend creating a separate method that would be called, maybe inside of update counter, it would call update color, right? So maybe part of the update counter method is updating color. That would make sense. But anyway, I do recommend trying to keep it in a singular line like this so that your async curly braces aren't holding all the code. Like technically, you could write all of this code right here and all of this code right here, but just don't do that. Having these methods makes it so much more readable and a lot easier to modify your code in the future and for others who might be assisting. So we're going to go ahead and hit World Simulation On to prove that that does exactly what I said, which is the same thing, but with 1 less loop, right? 1 less set interval. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-Z to put the code back the way we just had it. And now what we can do is start doing something slightly different. How do I want to show you this? I think what I want to do is change this from setInterval to setTimeout. So now this is a setTimeout. We no longer really need this timer ID, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And what timeout is going to do is it's going to say, okay, this .update color is going to run after 1 second. And that means when the timer updates over here, updates the counter for the first time, which I want to put back on a singular line, so let me quickly fix that too. And then Shift-Alt-F to make it pretty. After a 1 second delay, once we update the counter for the first time, we're going to start updating the color. I do think on start, we should have updated the color. So let's actually not use a set timeout at all, because it's really not necessary. And instead, we're just going to call update color. So on world start, it starts updating the color. And if we hit Control Save, the way this is currently set to run, this is just going to run update color one time. And I just wanted it to not start as white because it's kind of a jarring switch from white to a color. World simulation on. So now it always starts as orange, but we're not changing the color yet. And so if we go back in here, if we change update color to be async by typing async before update color, this is now running on a separate thread, and we can now do timer-like things inside of this function or method. And one example of this would be adding a delay. And so I'm going to just demonstrate this very quickly by doubling the code up, Shift-Alt-F. And obviously this isn't code I would ever write, but I just want to show you that we have this code and we can add a delay right here. So this is going to be a delay. Now to add a delay is something I'm not super comfortable with, so I actually have an example of it open on my other computer. And the way that this works is we type await, and then we type new promise. And a promise basically says, I promise to send you back something. This one is void. And I just want to write it out first because then I'll read it. Like I said, I'm not exactly the most confident with promises. It's something I just don't touch often enough to feel super confident with. So this .async.setTimeout, and then parentheses resolve, and then the amount of time we want to wait. Let's wait 1 second, so 1,000 milliseconds. And I see I've done something wrong. I think it's supposed to be resolve.bind this. Let me see. We've got red curly braces. Let's hover over it. Void or promise like void to void is not assignable to parameter of timer handler. I guess because it returns a number, so I need to change this to be a number. Is that right? No? Darn it. I wish I have code that does this somewhere. I need to find it. So what we're trying to do is wait for this promise to complete. And so this promise is saying we're going to resolve after a period of time. This is just a simple arrow function for reference. So that's Shift-Alt-F, probably more familiar to you. So we've got a parameter of resolve, which is a promise like void or void. Then async.setTimeout. I think this is where I need to put something like curly braces, parenthesis, arrow function. Ah, that was it, Shift-Alt-F. So we say this.async.setTimeout arrow function. So, because we're calling the setTimeout, just like we've already used the setTimeout, so you're familiar with this concept, right? So we've got setTimeout. We're saying after a delay of 1 second, we want to resolve the promise. And then to resolve the promise, I believe you need to call it with parentheses. It looks like it's callable. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. We're going to try that and see. It's not giving us any errors. Let's just test it and see if it works. If you know more about promises, I would love for you to leave a comment with heavy detail, and I would love to pin it to the top, because they're definitely something that I'm uncomfortable with, because I just don't use them nearly enough. Okay, that worked. And it happens so fast it's hard to see, but what you're going to watch happen is the color's orange, and then it changes to lighter orange. And that's what we expected to happen. If we go back to our code here, you will see that we were planning to wait 1 second and then update the color again, right? So if we change this to 2 seconds, we can see that that will wait 2 seconds just to make sure that it is doing what we're saying. Give that a second to compile. And one more. Okay, clear, world simulation on. Orange, and then we wait 1, and then it goes. Yep, there it is. Perfect. Okay, so we're doing good. I'm glad I got that working. So what this has done is it's allowed us to add a delay inside of our code. And that's what these async methods can do, is they can have delays in it, which means we can do something pretty neat. If we type while, parentheses, curly braces, we need to give it a condition, but a while loop allows us to run while a condition is true. For instance, let's say we want to cycle through hue one entire time. No. Let's do something that always count. We know count is going to go up to 60. So let's just say while count is less than 60, less than 60. So it should equal 60. We need to say this dot count. That's why it's upset. I forgot to click enter while I was typing count, just for reference. So while this dot count is less than 60, now 60 is now a magic number. Typically you want to put a variable at the top to define your magic number, but since I'm kind of in a rush, I've got about 5 minutes left till I actually have to just quit. But anyway, we're doing fine. I'm trying to slow myself down. But anyway, in this while, we're going to run this while as long as this is true. So I can alt arrow down and we can delete this line of code because that was a duplicate. Now we can add a delay inside of our while loop. So if we move this down to the bottom here, we now have a while loop that does what our update color was doing, but it's running this while for a long time. And let's change the delay to 1. Now this probably feels like a way more complicated way of doing it, but this is really mostly so I can teach you this async method and await, so that you learn more about it. Like I definitely would recommend using either on update if you want this to update for every frame, which I think we've seen in a couple tutorials now, or will see very soon if you're before. I think this is before the motion tutorial, so that's coming up in the next tutorial. So you'll see on update soon, which allows you to update every frame. You could also create, something that happens, an interval that runs 100 times a second or 10 times a second. That would look pretty good. So this is definitely not necessarily the way that I would recommend doing an update color, but like I said, this is just to demonstrate async and in a while with an await in it. So what we should see happen now is the exact same thing we saw before, which probably feels pretty silly to be at the same point, but now it's going to go change to orange, change to yellow, change to lime, green, more green. Oh, it is still changing. Didn't feel like it was changing there for a second. There it goes. Very nice. And so this while loop is still running. Like this color means the while loop is still running, which is pretty crazy. So let's see if we can create some buttery smooth color changing by changing this to be 10 times per second, so 100 millisecond delay. And what we should now see is a lot more smooth. Clear. And clear. World simulation on. Well, it's not as buttery smooth as I would hope, but that's because our the amount we're changing by is too high. We're changing by 20. There's only 20 steps. So that means every 2 seconds we're running through the entire color spectrum. So we want to change this to maybe 100 steps, so 0.01, which means every 5 seconds we'll run through the whole color spectrum. And world simulation on. There we go. That's a lot smoother. It's definitely not perfect, and we can make that better, but that's pretty cool. To make it better, I would change this to be twice as fast, so 50, so that's 20 times per second. Since there's 60 frames per second, that's pretty close to the frame rate. And then this speed seemed pretty good, but because of this doubling up, it's going to go faster, so we could try 0.5 to match the original speed we were just watching. Give that a second, and now what we should see after this compiles is the same exact color speed, but smoother, because there's more frame changes. And clear, and world simulation on. Nice. That is so good. Yeah, at 20, that looks amazing. And again, you could use setInterval instead to do this exact same thing. So if you wanted to implement this, maybe I'll show you how I would implement this as well. But we're not done yet. There is one more thing we can do, so this await isn't necessary. We're going to get a little scary territory. I don't know what this is going to do because I don't know if you should run color as many times as we're about to run it. and we're going to update the hue. Well, we're removing the delay, okay? We're removing the delay to demonstrate a property. So I'm going to add a 0, 1 here. So it should hopefully slow it down a little bit on the speed. I hope, maybe not. Honestly, I'm not sure. So I'll let you know if there's a flicker warning. If you need that, close your eyes and I'll let you know if it's flickering in a second. Okay. Oh boy, are we gonna crash the world? World simulation didn't click. Let's try again. Okay, it's on. And, okay, so we broke it. We broke it. Script execution timedown was terminated. That could have been the while loop. Let's try it one more time. I have this running in a different world. I might have to go to that world to show you the example. I have 1 minute. And I think that's a really great example to round us out. So I don't have time to show you setInterval. This would be a great opportunity if you want some like extra credit. Build this exact same thing as it was before, where it was updating, you know, every 50 milliseconds, but using a setInterval, so no async method, just to like test your skills and make sure you understand the content. But we're going to jump into a different world I built so that I can show you a different async. Let's see. This is the dungeon. I've been there, I'm sure, recently. I don't know if I have a picture of it though, so I might need to search dungeon. It's got to be this one. Okay, so the dungeon algorithm, I originally wrote this in code blocks and it took about 20 seconds to run. I rebuilt it in TypeScript using an async while loop and it runs about 1 second. It's so much faster, but it does take time. And a while loop traditionally does break out. So if you try to run a while loop without it being async on a separate thread, you will cause your world to crash like what we were seeing there, which is why I was very curious that that was happening. I might have added a delay to avoid that. Like that's probably the answer, is you just need a delay, and the problem is I didn't have a delay. Let's see, I need to get to the code, so we go scripts, and this is going to be somewhere in here. We're just going to open an external editor, and there's a search feature on the left. That's super great. Yes, I trust myself. Yes, we can allow search, and we are searching for async. So we'll just search async, and here we can see game manager as async, async start, await tile manager function, generate new tile set. Okay, so what you can see here is that I've made the start method async. I then tell it to await the tile manager function's generate new tile set. So if we go to tile manager function, go up here to search, here's tile manager function, and what we were calling was generate new tile set. Here you can see this is an async function, which is very similar to an async method like we were doing. You can see that this returns a promise of void. By returning a promise of void, we can await this function, meaning you can have an async and do something after this is finished returning. I wasn't in that case, but if we go back here, oh, that's not where we were. Well, anyway, in that spot, in that start, we could have, oh, I'm over time, I've got to go. Anyway, just quickly showing, we have await here, lots of awaiting, and you can build these really complex thing where something's happening here, something's happening here, then we wait, we do something here. Despawn any previously spawned tiles. Let's see. I do need to run into this meeting, I'm so sorry. But here's a while loop. You're gonna see there's a lot of while loops. I don't know why this is definitely not a bad one, I guess. If I search Command F while queued asset maps triple equals undefined, here's an await. I don't know, this is too complex to talk about, I'm sorry. But there are places where using this makes sense, and this runs so much code that using a while loop, so here's another awaiting a new promise, just like what we saw. This is using that same method I tried to do, so I don't know what's different here, but you can see that this is the correct way to do that. There's a lot to talk about here. We will probably get into this when we get into more complex topics. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. I gotta run. Bye!